My name is Dundrup. I'm the SPC here at Tupton Norbuling, and on behalf of the center, I just wanted to thank Venerable Lhagsam for joining our international faculty of teachers. This is Venerable's first teaching for us virtually. We do hope it is not the last teaching that we have. We're hopeful that we, over the next years, get more teachings, but we're grateful that she accepted our invitation to teach this course for us the Sunday nights this month. Venerable took ordination in 2000 and is a graduate of FPMT's basic program, and also brings a unique perspective, having experience in palliative care. So really showing empathy and compassion in action, and having all of those real world experiences that she brings to her teachings. So again, we're just really thankful that you were able to teach for us. And so over to you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for your kind invitation. I'm probably the most technologically incompetent person in the modern world, but Miffy is very competent, as you all know, so she's here. So if I sort of look to my right, then it's because she's the only person in the room. Those were her fingers. So this session and the next three sessions as well, the structure is we start with a meditation that's a relaxing, settling into teaching meditation, and then the class. And please put your questions into the chat at any time. I always think it's a bit pointless to continue if I haven't explained something clearly enough, or it's just raised doubts in someone's mind. And Miffy will wave at me or whatever. And then, yes, because I don't want people to sort of think that this is just blur. And yeah, so then at the end we have a meditation that's relevant to the particular topic that we've taught in this class. So I'm assuming that most of you have a comfortable position for when you're meditating. So for some people, that's sitting on a chair, sitting cross-legged. Some people can meditate lying down. That just leads me into sleep. So I'm hopeless at that. But just sitting in whatever's comfortable for you, what's most conducive for you. And so there is a traditional position of meditating, and there are many advantages to that position. What we're looking for is that the body be completely comfortable and relaxed, so we're not distracted by discomfort in the body. Our meditation's an activity of the mind, but if our body gets uncomfortable, then of course our mind is immediately distracted to that. So if you need to change position, if there's some discomfort arises, just do that in a very gentle manner, just slowly and gently moving into a more comfortable position. So we need our hands to be in a way that's comfortable as well. Traditionally, in this particular tradition, we would have the right hand on top of the left and the thumbs at the palms upwards and the two thumbs meeting to make a sort of triangular shape. But for some people, that's not comfortable. And having your arms a little bit away from the body, leaving some space for the air to circulate, this can just let any heat that builds up to just not accumulate too much in our body, depending on how the weather is. So just let your shoulders relax, let them drop. Having your back relatively straight, but within the natural curvature of the back, not in a rigid sort of way. Just helps with the energy flow through your body. Having your eyes open a little bit and looking down into the area of your lap or onto the floor. And this level, how we tilt our head, this can be one of the ways if we become drowsy in our meditation, we can open our eyes a little bit wider. If that's too distracting, we can just close the eyes. Having particularly our mouth and jaw relaxed, so having your teeth a little bit apart, not pressed together. If you can breathe through your nose, just having your mouth closed and the tip of your tongue against the back of your upper teeth. So just let your body relax for a few minutes into that position, adjusting to see if there's any changes you need to make. And then as much as possible, just letting go of that. Am I sitting right? Am I not critical of how you're sitting? We're just looking for comfort. And so to relax our body in a much deeper way, just bring your attention to the very topmost part of your head and let a feeling of relaxation develop there. So at that very top part of the head, there aren't any muscles. It's our muscles that get tight and causes tension and pain. So right at the very topmost part of your head, just let a strong sense of relaxation develop there. And then imagine that relaxed feeling travels down from the top of your head, slowly and gently through your head, down through your forehead, your eyelids, down through your cheeks, and checking again those jaw muscles, making sure they haven't become tight again. Down the sides of your head, your ears, down the back of your head, and down through your head, through the inside of your head, through your skull and into your brain. Let that sense of relaxation penetrate every cell, every atom, every tiny particle of your head. And then continue to travel down to relax your neck and your throat. And then flow out across your shoulders, relaxing those large muscles. It's very easy for those muscles to become tight. And let that sense of relaxation travel gently down your whole back so that your entire back becomes completely relaxed. And now the front of your body, letting the relaxed feeling travel from your shoulders into your chest, relaxing internal organs as well as the muscles. Let it travel down into your abdomen, through the upper parts of your legs and your knees, the lower parts of your leg, ankles and feet, all the way down to the tips of your toes. Allow that relaxed feeling to travel from your shoulders down the upper parts of your arms and your elbows, the lower parts of your arms, your wrists, your hands, and your fingers. So do your best to allow your body to remain in this relaxed state for this session. If it becomes tense again, just remember what it feels like now, completely relaxed. Just let your breath come and go in its natural rhythm. So we all had a motivation for coming to this session this morning. So we can extend that motivation. We can have the wish that whatever we might learn here today or whatever we might experience, that brings benefit to ourselves and also to others. That we be able to apply it in our lives in a way that brings greater peace and happiness, more positive thoughts and feelings. And when we have these in our mind, then we are able to benefit others just by being present, just by helping them with whatever it is that they're having difficulty with. And then when you're ready, just slowly open your eyes. So has everyone got the definitions?
You just let me know which one you want me to put up and I'll put it up.
Okay, so this session we're going to talk mainly about anger and the disadvantages of anger. So Ksanti is a Sanskrit word that is what we would all love to be able to have in our minds all the time. Patient acceptance, endurance or tolerance. And so this is considered a very important Buddhist virtue aimed in terms of overcoming our anger. And so it's one of the 6 perfections. then anger is one of the 5 main afflictions. So I've used as much as possible the definitions from either Discovering Buddhism or the basic program, or, the things that are part of the FPMT teachings. So the definition they use in the basic program are malice towards sentient beings, living beings, our own suffering and phenomena. So these are the sources of our suffering, and it acts as a support for not abiding in virtuous conduct and for misconduct. So in the definition where it says these are the sources of our suffering, it's about what we consider causes our suffering without looking at the underlying circumstances externally and also internally. What are the things that bring us suffering that other people might find don't cause them any suffering at all? And sometimes the things we think will bring us happiness actually in time bring us unhappiness. So these changing things, this is our interpretation and our past experience. So during the different stages of this teaching, and often we use in different teachers negative qualities and positive qualities. So from our perception, negative qualities are anything that don't please us, but in reality, negative qualities within ourselves are things that, we'd like to have opposed, that we would like to not have in our mind. They make us unhappy as well as sometimes creating unhappy conditions for others. And positive qualities are those things we would always like to have in our mind. So things like this patient acceptance, tolerance, forbearance, with the many, many things that are quite difficult to deal with. Having developed Ksanti, it's not like then the world turns into a fabulous place, or that we pretend it's a fabulous place. We just find different ways of dealing with that. Most of the time, hopefully, we do, but sometimes there are things that are very upsetting. So there are probably many, many different definitions of anger in different dictionaries and whatever. But what actually happens when we get angry, that's what we know what it feels like. And it starts with something happens that displeases us. And sometimes what displeases us was fine yesterday or a week ago, and there's a lot of our internal response is the problem. And it seems that anger just arises in a flash. Suddenly we're angry. We were fine until that thing happened that displeases us. And immediately we want to remove that unpleasant circumstances or move away. Whether it's a particular something that broke or a person who said something rude, whatever, we want to go away from that. But sometimes that's not possible, of course. And so if we slow down that response, if we slow down what happens, there's an opportunity before we become completely angry to manage it in a different way. We have an opportunity to make a choice. But once the anger's full-blown, then it's very difficult to see anything else, and we've lost our opportunity. We just tend to follow along with the anger. And then driven by anger, we say and do many things that later we have cause to regret. And so in trying to avoid anger, sometimes we just drive anger inwards, and that's also not necessarily helpful because it can become stronger and explode in a more powerful way, but also there are many negative effects that we'll talk about a bit later. The negative effects of anger on ourselves. So we can look at an example, a possible situation. You might be working on a project with a colleague and she comes over and accuses you of being incompetent and lazy. And so as she talks, the anger arises in your mind, or you justifying what she's saying, and you can even start to feel it in your body. And you respond saying she has no right to talk to you like that. And soon you're both saying things that are not completely true, that aren't completely what you think. They're exaggerations, and everyone nearby, they know what's going on. So in this type of situation, we can sort of feel attacked or vulnerable, and the only way to respond is to retaliate in kind. Almost automatically, this can happen if we're not careful. And at the time, it can seem like pain comes from the other person, all the discomfort that we feel. But in reality, it's from us thinking along the lines of, she's talking to me like that? How dare she talk to me in that way? And so we're looking at it just from our side and considering our view of ourselves compared to what's being said. But how objective is our own view of ourselves, or our view of the other person? In this situation, we just see we're right and they're wrong. But undoubtedly, the other person thinks that they're right, and, it's ourselves that are wrong. So in these sort of situations, it can be seen from different perspectives. And probably the other people who are around and overhear it think they're both exaggerated, they're both a bit wrong. So, and it's difficult to prove one way or another, who has more right or wrong, and it's really not helpful to pursue some of these things sometimes. Sometimes if we can look objectively and see that the other person has a point as well, that can help reduce it, reduce our angry response and stop it getting out of hand. But it's one of the things that anger does. Anger exaggerates or overestimates the negative qualities of the person or the object that we're angry with. And then because we've projected or exaggerated these negative qualities, then we can develop the wish to harm with our physical or verbal actions. It could be that we physically just walk away or I don't know, slam a hand on the desk or whatever we might do physically or verbally. We might say something, give a mean look, close off our hearts, not talk to the person for a week, whatever it might be. But it's a matter of, are we really looking at, there's very few of us 100% right, probably only the Buddhas. But we don't ever want that challenged. We always think our point of view is right until we look, and then sometimes we can see, well, probably that doesn't encompass all situations. So there was a case of a man, I put this course together a while ago, but at the time it was a fairly recent experience where someone who was so upset in a fit of rage that he got a tractor and completely destroyed the family home. Now, that's fairly extreme anger. And you can't imagine what was going on in his mind, but you can imagine how he felt when he calmed down and realised, now he's homeless and all sorts of things, so is the family. So anger can be one of the most destructive forces in the whole universe. It can destroy so much. It can destroy our own inner peace, and it can cause us to inflict irrational verbal and physical forces upon others, upon our family, our friends, those we don't know. And it can even help lead, in extreme cases, to people killing others, killing themselves, all sorts of things like that. And that's usually built up over a length of time, but not necessarily. And there are particular things that sort of give us less control over our emotions, if you like, in particular our anger. So, excessive drinking, reckless behaviour, all sorts of things that, because it starts off, and then we get angry and we do it more. Someone said, you should give up smoking, and just like, well, you can't tell me what to do, I'll smoke more. And we're harming ourselves in this. We're always harming ourselves in the end. So it says that anger makes even the most handsome person look ugly. That's just a look that changes all the time. But many of these things, if we become angry, our physical health, because we're not taking care of ourselves, we're not eating nutritious food and things like that. But it also leads to many other things that we don't want. It's not comfortable being around someone who's angry all the time. And so the angry person becomes more isolated and then becomes angry at that, because no one wants to talk to them. No one comes to see them. That's everybody else's fault. So it can lead to a lot of physical and mental and social discomfort and harm. And so then anger is one of the three poisonous minds: anger, attachment, and ignorance. And there's some ignorance in both anger and attachment, if you burrow all the way down to all of that. But anger can lead us to other destructive emotional states. And in the Buddhist teachings, there's also quite lengthy lists of non-virtuous states of mind, things like hatred and belligerence and resentment and envy, all these things that are slightly different definitions, but they all exaggerate and eat away at our happiness. They build on each other. If we're already feeling resentful, then it's easy to become envious for those who've got what we don't have and that sort of thing. And so the first step in overcoming our anger is to contemplate its many faults and generate a strong determination to free our mind from this. So it's not as easy as just having the words, of course. Often our anger, our whatever, it's got years of practice. It's very strong sometimes in us, in particular situations. But we need to examine why it is we have these strong feelings about particular situations, whatever it might be, and really look objectively. Is there any justification in wishing harm? And becoming angry at inanimate objects is really quite silly. If the clock doesn't work, throwing it at the wall doesn't actually help. It's not going to fix the clock. So, and as I say, the worst external enemy can only do so much in this life. The worst they can do is take our life. But that internal enemy of anger, this can works so much more because it goes with us. We take that familiarity to future lifetimes. It can take us into the misery of a hell rebirth, but there's also that familiarity with anger that can then in future lives make it come up more easily. We can easily find ways to become angry. And so no external enemy can do that. No external enemy determines our future, where our future rebirths are, or what we take with us in karmic conditions, in our karmic seeds, but also in our familiarity. We are the ones that control that. So just excuse me for a minute. Sorry. Antihistamines only work to a certain extent, or don't work quickly enough, or whatever. So once anger's erupted, then this is quite difficult to control, and we can try to control it by separating ourselves from the situation, if that's what's going to be safe, going for a walk, and whatever we can do that stops the angry thoughts consciously, that can be helpful. We can, in some situations, we can just sort of block if you're talking to your boss and he says something really off the wall that you don't like, getting angry with him is probably going to end up in much worse situation. So, if you want the job, probably best to sit on that anger for a while. But, it's no good just allowing that to fester within us forever. We need to find a way of dealing with that, whatever it might be. And so we can try consciously to block thoughts in a situation like that and distract ourselves by thinking about something else. And, it's a little bit like a mother who's got children who fight or argue or something, and she might try and distract them, come and have some lollies, you have this toy and you have this one, whatever it is. I've not been a parent in this lifetime. It's probably a jolly good idea, really. It wasn't necessarily of my choosing, it's just how it happened to be. So I would never criticise parents, and I think it's a very difficult job. But, even if you distract children with, here, come and have morning tea or something, then one of them will say, he's got a bigger piece of cake than me, and they're off again, arguing. So just trying to distract ourselves isn't going to get at the root cause of the problem of our anger either. So initially it's hard for us to recognise all the things that our angry mind can do. Our angry mind can bring up lots of negative qualities that we think really belong to that person and don't belong to us at all. And if we look really closely, we can see that these are our assumptions. These are our assumptions that that person only has negative qualities or whatever it might be. So when we do some meditation later on, don't pick the worst thing that's ever happened to try. When we try and look at ways to within ourselves deal with our anger, we start with looking at the things that irritate us a little bit, and then with practice we get more and more strength and more capacity to deal with the things that are really difficult for us. So it's a way of developing our skills, if you like. So if we think of something that happened recently that made you angry, whatever it might have been, something on TV, something the neighbour said or did, and something that hurt your feelings, and just ask yourself, how does this person appear to me? And then sort of, when you look at your response, is that really accurate? Is that really the only way that that person exists. Do they really possess all those negative qualities, and with no, you know, that I'm not exaggerating at all? Or are we overemphasizing some of those? Have I got some bias or prejudice towards this person? Would everyone think the same way that I do? So then this is the thing to be really mindful of. Is this person permanently harmful by nature? Are they always harmful and critical to others, 24 hours a day? So if not, then that's not their true nature. So we have to be cautious about getting angry with them if it's not their true nature. Can we look and see that temporarily they're under control of strong negative emotions? Kind of like someone who's drunk or temporarily insane. They're overwhelmed by that strong anger. They're not inherently a bad person, rather they're temporarily under the control of these strong emotions, and so they act in that, or speak in that way. And we can also reflect about, are they happy? Would they have created this incident if they were truly happy? So probably not. And this is why the loving kindness or compassion is a more reasonable response. They're suffering. They're under the control of afflictions and their past karma. And we've had that response at times to things. Probably we're having it right when we're talking with them, when the situation happened. Those are arising within us. So having that, developing anger within us, that doesn't remove the initial response, the initial harm that that person brought to us, and the initial response that we had. If we respond with anger, then two people are suffering instead of one. We've both got afflictive states of mind. So then we've both got pain. And so then we're not under control of our own, we're not under control of our own loving, kind mind, but it's the afflictions controlling us, the same affliction that controlled the person who at first was angry with us. So then when we look at it like that, who's the wrongdoer? Who's without fault? So I guess you say that we need to work towards preventing our anger arising. And one way is to reflect on the drawbacks of anger again and again. If we can avoid becoming angry when we have bias, or when we have irritation, when we're not feeling well, then if we can avoid the anger, if we can acknowledge that we're not at our best, then sometimes we can do something to help reduce that. We're aware of that we're a bit more likely to become irritated today, and just be aware of that. Most of us know that if we're free of bias, if we're patient and relaxed, then we can deal with things much better, even though they're just as the person's the same, the person we're dealing with, the situation we're dealing with. And so His Holiness says we need some inner disarmament, was how it was translated. And then there's no room for hatred and anger in our minds or in our hearts. So I think that takes quite a level of inner disarmament that may take quite a while to develop. But we can start. If we never start, we never develop anything. So anger can lead to the total destruction of our peace and our harmony in our mind, but also in our relationships. Like I said, no one wants to be around the angry person. So if we look at what happens, what it is that happens in our body, physically first, our body gets tense, our face gets red because our blood pressure goes up. We say and do things that later on we regret. They aren't even necessarily what we really think. But if we're angry, even if we've got a low level of burning or resentment to whatever, are we happy? Does food taste good? Is it comfortable and peaceful? Do we sleep well? We've got a whole lot of irritation and anger going on. Even after we think it's past, even when we've said, oh, well, I said my piece, still, it's not necessarily that then our mind's at peace. We go over and over and over it and have bad dreams and all sorts of things. Are our friends and relatives and family, are they happy when we're angry? Do they always feel safe with you? Are you going to sort of say something to them that makes, they feel unhappy about? And so it's sometimes said when they do all sorts of health assessments that people who have a lot of cynicism or aggression or anger, they're often high risk of developing serious illnesses, and it's because of this high blood pressure, poor sleep, poor digestion, all these things that anger brings into our body. And when we drive others away, socially, when we drive others away because we're always angry and cranky, then we don't have the company of others and the social supports that can help us in difficult times. So then when difficulty arrives, then, well, there's no one here to help me. And so it creates many difficulties in our life. And sometimes for some people, if we're angry and upset, we indulge in much more risky behaviours, eating more chocolate, drinking more alcohol. And some people, when they feel really angry and stressed, I'll just go for a drive. And that doesn't always end well either, does it? Probably some of you live in different countries where maybe you don't drive as much as we do in Australia for distance and various reasons. And driving when you're angry is not a good start. Probably better to find some way to not be driving, because that leads in time to road rage. They've even given it a name. And yeah. So many of the sutras and texts say strong anger can destroy eons of our virtue. And that's, you know, all that hard-earned merit over lifetimes we've developed. It can be destroyed, gone in a flash, you know, if we do something really harmful to others. And so when we see faults in another person, you know, our anger still destroys our virtue, the impact of that long term. So that's very important for us to consider that as well, not just the impact on this life, but, you know, the impact that it can have in future lives.
So Michael's got a question. Michael, do you want to just ask your question?
Sure. I'm just wondering, with everything you've said about anger, is there a useful, or at least if it's not useful, at least a safe way of letting it out when you are experiencing? Obviously, the long-term goal is to address the situation and address my own things, my own issues through meditation and study. But in the short term, when it's there, is there an effective way of releasing it, or a safe way of releasing anger?
So if there's often it depends on the situation. Like I said, with your boss, probably not. Probably just better hang on to that for a while and try not to, you know, to just sit on it. But we do need to release it. And I just got to the part where Geshe Zopa said, for Buddhists, the answer to the question of retaliation is about karma, remembering that karmic impact as well. And he said, and I don't have a date for when he said that here, that retaliation's like holding a burning charcoal in your hand and hoping to throw it at someone and harm them. But that doesn't get rid of our anger, really. It can sometimes make it worse. So meanwhile, the person holding the anger is the one holding the burning charcoal and being harmed. And it harms us in many ways. So why hold on to it? So, and just thinking that, why am I hanging on to this? And it's because we're so familiar with it from this life, but also over many lifetimes for eons, Geshe Zopa says we've had it. We certainly didn't do in all those lifetimes what the Buddha managed to do. So we have to find a way to let it go. And until then, while ever we've got it, there's that risk of creating more and more negative karma. So it depends on what we're angry about. And if we're angry about some injustice, then, you know, we do need to stand up and speak out at times about things that are unjust or perpetuated by people who have a lot of power over people with no power and that sort of thing. And so, but we need to be careful to do that, not motivated by anger, not motivated by a wish to harm, to create even more harm, but motivated by the positive qualities like compassion for all those who suffer, the perpetrator and the victims. And His Holiness says, if you think one person can't make a difference, try going to sleep with a mosquito in the room. That one mosquito can make a lot of difference to how well we can get off to sleep. But we do need to find ways to deal with our anger. And once it's arisen, it is quite difficult to deal with. So we try and look at ways to look at what it is that we can do. And that's just where I'd come to in my notes. But just before I go through that, I can't remember, one of the teachers said the only useful or helpful anger that we can have is to be angry at our own anger, have a wish to harm or diminish our very own anger. So this is sort of the stage where we've come to now, and this is what we need to think about. How is it we're going to do this? So your question was very timely, Michael. So if we can, as soon as possible, we need to remove ourselves from the situation that's making you angry. So then we can, using logic, not just remove ourselves and go away and ask more, how can I harm this person? Miffy?
Oh, Scarlett has a question as well. Scarlett, would you like to unmute?
Hi, sure. What I was wondering is I would like your point of view of like when you mentioned that, anger is not all accumulated in this lifetime, but past lives. Like, I am so confused when this is said because, like, what knows or who knows? Like, right now, I am Scarlet, right? And so, next life, who knows? But like, what is it that I heard the mind reincarnates, but is it like there's over 8 billion of us? So is that like 8 billion strings that follow our next life? Like, I don't get how the conclusion is that this has accumulated in past lifetimes. And I don't understand how it will follow. Like, I don't understand how that came about. Thank you.
Okay. So the thing is that we become familiar with different things in our mind in each lifetime. And so it's in the Buddhist teaching, Buddha said he only saw the complete sequence of his karma after he became fully enlightened. He could look back over 500 lifetimes or whatever and see that our karma, the karmic seeds, the karmic potential in our mind, this can increase. And the teachings often focus on the negative qualities, but also our positive qualities. And in one of the teachings or sutras, he said when he was previously a king, he looked back and said, all of this comes from offering one bowl of gruel, which would be curd or something, to a monk or a teacher or something. That had accumulated over time, grown and expanded. But also it's true from the Buddhist teachings that our negative karma, and that's why it's suggested we do purification practice at night to purify whatever we've done in the day so it doesn't expand and grow and get bigger. We have familiarity with different things. So this is how the Buddhist teachings would explain that children are born, and by the time they can reach the keys of the piano or hold the violin or whatever, they're able to produce marvelous harmonious sounds like Mozart or any other number of these. They didn't learn it in this lifetime. It's something they'd practiced and were very familiar with and very good at in past lifetimes. And so then the conditions arose and those karmic seeds ripened in this lifetime. I can't play the piano, by the way. So it's not, that karmic seed never ripened for me, and I probably don't even have it really. But who knows, over many lifetimes. But this familiarity with anger, it's quite common, it would appear. And the saddest thing is the people with more power, kings, politicians, whatever, when that is strong in them, then of course then they make decisions that affect other people and it all goes downhill from there. But it's understanding the mind, and that this is the subtle mind. Babies are not born with the capacity to speak a language or know how to tie their shoelaces or anything else. It's the very subtle mind, sometimes called the fundamental mind or the subtle fundamental mind, is what leaves the body at the time of death, goes through the bardo and into the next life, and just takes with it the karmic seeds from past lives and the current life we're leaving, and what we're familiar with. So if you watch even children born into the same family, the same upbringing as much as we can tell from outside. Some are really confident. They'll run up to strangers and start giving them toys, telling them about whatever they had for breakfast. Others are very, very shy, and their parents are forever trying to get them to just talk to the neighbour or just say hello to the kid at preschool or whatever it is, you know. And so the extremes of either of those are quite challenging for parents. I knew a woman who had a daughter who was obsessed with learning and whatever, and she was always saying to her, don't worry, it's just school. Just go to bed. You don't have to stay up all night studying. Just go to bed, even when she was quite small. She had an older brother who did no worry about school at all. And her mother was always saying, but this is school, it's important. You need to be. So very difficult when you've got those extremes in the one family. But it's because of past karma, you know, and then they've come into this life, more or less the same upbringing, and very different personalities, attitudes, whatever, however you might say. So does that help explain?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
The Buddha did say, by the way, that this is an extremely hidden phenomenon. He could not see this before the whole sequence, before he achieved full enlightenment. So what hope have we got? Some things we have to accept because we have faith in the other things of the Buddha's teachings we've seen and applied, and we can see the logic and reasoning for. And some are slightly hidden phenomena, and some we accept because the other things the Buddha taught, we can see by logic or reasoning that they are true.
Thank you.
Susan also has a question. Susan, would you like to go for it?
Yes, thank you, Miffy. Venerable, I've sometimes wondered, what is it when the karmic seeds leave the body with that aspect of mind that you said at the time of death? What is it that keeps the karmic seeds unified to be able to make the journey into another, a next life? What is it that keeps it together rather than just,
Scattering to the
scattering?
universe.
Yes, thank you.
Well, that extremely subtle fundamental mind is not functional during our life. It's not something that in this lifetime we have the mind that sees phenomena, that interprets smells, tastes, sight, you know, gets us a PhD or a failure in grade 7, that mind, the mind of this lifetime. And that's a very valid mind to have, because that's the mind that can rationally and logically see the benefit of doing virtuous things and the disadvantage of non-virtuous things. So does that make sense? This mind, the consciousness we have now, that's the mind we have. But that mind, during the dying process, that disintegrates. We lose track of all that. Like I said, babies don't come to this world knowing how to speak the language they spoke in the last lifetime. Well, that mind disintegrates. And then in the very much towards the end of our life, when those are no longer functional, then this extremely subtle fundamental mind, that's what passes from this life through the bardo to the next life and holds all those karmic seeds and imprints. And so we don't experience it during this lifetime, only very much towards the end. And so it's also, you know, not something we are familiar with from this life. And then when a baby's being conceived and born, it, you know, physically science talks about the ovum of the mother and the sperm of the father, and they come together, and that creates the body, but the mind comes from that extremely subtle fundamental mind also uniting with those other two aspects. So there's really the third one, Buddhism says. So sorry, I can't. It's not a provable thing. It's just a thing that's what happens. And I don't know if you've ever been with someone who's close to the end of their life or dying, like the physical energy withdraws and comes to just being the warmth in the heart. And that's where the subtle fundamental mind exists. And when that consciousness leaves, and this isn't a course about death and dying, so I can't go into great length, but when the consciousness leaves the body isn't necessarily when the heart stops beating or they stop breathing. It's a bit after that, or sometimes a lot time after that, if you very experienced Deshi or whatever teacher practitioner who can use that time, and they do use that time when they're not distracted by all the sights, sounds, thoughts, and whatever of this life, because those don't exist. They've gone. They're no longer functional, and they use that time for practice and can make big advancements on the spiritual path using just that time. But that takes a lot of explanation, and we don't really have the time. Yeah.
Venerable, I have a question. So what you're saying is like that the anger actually isn't me.
Not at all.
No,
There's not.
so because that in itself, like when anger's manifesting is like this huge wave that comes over me, to just think it's not me, like I'm not one with the anger, is kind of.
Well, that's right. It's not that the angry person's angry all the time. There are other times when they're loving, they're kind, they're generous. The translators sometimes call these adventitious mental factors. They come and they go. They're not. It's just like we're not kind and compassionate all the time. We're not always automatically anything, just like our physical body isn't automatically always going to work. We're not always asleep. We're not always eating. We're not. But yeah, our mind, many factors can come into our mind, and we can actively use our mind to combat these negative qualities that we don't want in the mind. So is that okay?
Oh, William's got a question.
Yes, will you?
I'll just ask him.
Oh, I'm unmuted now. I think one of the things I really liked in your comments was that we should try and understand why we are angry and then go from there. And the reason I say that is I can't help but watch the news most times and not get angry about some injustice that's being perpetuated in the world somewhere. And, I found that my ways of reacting to that are either, if I can do something about it, be it join a protest march or send monies to Doctors Without Borders or something like that, that might have some more positive impact on the people being affected. But I still have real problems having compassion for the people that are perpetuating those injustices, especially when I see them do it week after week after week after week. And so in order to counteract that, a lot of times when I know that it's going to be a depressing thing for me to see on the news, I'll just go a week or two without watching the news and do that. But I'm not sure what else to do there. But again, it's really hard to have compassion when I feel like 100% of my compassion should be going to the people that are being hurt in some way.
And it does seem, that more and more this is what we hear. And part of it is because we've got this instant social media, there's some bombs dropped or children harmed or whatever. And that night it's, on our phones, on our TVs, whatever. And it is distressing. It absolutely is distressing. And like you say, sometimes we can do something in a practical way, but in terms of not allowing it to, if we get angry, And it seems an automatic response to do this. How could you dare do that? Sometimes the people, they think it's justifiable that they do this because of something or other else that they hold as a strong belief, or they're right, or whatever it might be. And from their point of view, this is okay because they justify it by something or other else. But so the violence is not something that we hopefully ever see as okay, because it's not. It's just bringing harm, and in the long term will bring harm to the perpetrator. And I used to have this very strongly in my mind, the victims of perpetrator thing. And when I was doing a particular job one time, I was like, yeah, don't ask me to talk to the wife beater or someone, because I'll probably it won't be helpful what I say. But that was my lack of training and my lack of understanding. That was just, for stuff in this world, in this lifetime. But in the long term, if you think of the karmic consequences that comes, you can have compassion. And the first time I was introduced to this idea was actually from Miffy's mother. There was a situation not long after I first came to this tradition in Buddhism of Angritambasena, and some of you, if you're old enough, might remember, where a 2-year-old boy was kidnapped in England by a couple of 10-year-old kids and was tortured and killed. And I said to Inta, how are we meant to think about this? The torment for that 2-year-old for start, who was tortured, and then the family and the poor mother who momentarily left him to duck into a shop and all this sort of thing. It's very easy to have compassion for one side. Well, I didn't even have the word, how are we meant to think? And she thought about it for a while, and she said, we need to develop compassion for everyone involved, the families of the children who were the perpetrators themselves. And a couple of years ago, there was an article, I don't know, that was in the news, or I sometimes read other things. But anyway, those 2 kids that were then, of course, locked away from society for quite some time because they obviously weren't safe to be roaming around. One of them, after about 15 years or something, they tried to allow back into some sort of contact with society, but because of the weirdness and what had happened and everything, he just finished up having to go back. The only thing he knew was being imprisoned virtually, and he just couldn't make it in society. And when the other one, a bit later, it wasn't at the same time, they weren't together. It was the same. They can't lead a normal life. And so it is sad all round. When Inta first said that to me, I was like, it's pretty hard developing compassion. Easy for the family of the 2-year-olds, not so easy for the family of the 10-year-olds. But yeah, they have no chance at all of a normal life, and never will. They haven't grown up with, going to school and all those things.
So, Venerable, when you say develop compassion to them, like what bit of them do we develop compassion to? Because we don't want to develop compassion or, some kind of tolerance towards the harm. So how do you think of it in your mind?
Well, it's not sort of tolerance to the harm. It's not that should be encouraged or perpetuated. The compassion's, the wish that beings be free of suffering, is like at that age, they couldn't even recognize the way we do now the suffering that would be caused. But it's what they will face in the future. But even what they faced in this life, they hadn't had the normal life of a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old to go and play sport or go to school or determine what career they might have, to lead anything vaguely like a normal life. And even when they tried to introduce them to a normal life in a supervised way, neither of them could manage. They haven't, there's no capacity that they ever are going to have normal life, even if they change their names, whatever, within themselves. There's not, they haven't developed any of that. And very hard, something's very hard to develop after a certain time. And then there's the karmic consequences in future lifetimes. Are they going to be familiar with virtually with being in jail, being instituted? Is that the familiarity they take? Or are they familiar? Often those places are incredibly violent, as we know in Australia for some of the recent investigations and things. Do they take that violence? Is that what they're familiar with? They take this. Is that what they came with, in past lives? Is that what they came with? Quite possibly. It's a pretty horrible trajectory. What were they subjected to before that? They thought torturing a 2-year-old to death is a way to go. Very, very hard to imagine that in a 10-year-old.
Yeah, so for me, I just come back to no one ever acts badly because they're feeling peaceful in their own mind.
That's right. That's exactly right. And His Holiness says, we need this inner disarmament to bring this inner peace.
But I remember also in the news, I remember that happening and how the news demonized those children and said, well, they're evil. And so then they deserve to be locked up and not have a normal life. So they just got what they deserved anyway. And somehow those kids were seen as different from all other children.
Well, it's true that's how the media portrays stuff, a right and a wrong. And this was certainly wrong action. But psychologically, those kids, like, it's below the age where they can see consequence. And I'm not trying to justify what they did. Don't get me wrong here. What they did was appalling. But there's many aspects to it as well. There's no aspect of it that was okay, except the only and I don't know if the karmic consequences for the 2-year-old, if that had come about because that was the very last suffering he was ever going to experience before he became fully enlightened, then, that's even that, But yes, we have the karmic potential for experiencing many things if the conditions arise, that those seeds ripen. Yeah.
And do we also then, what scares me about that is that we have the karmic potential to do things, because then I think, well, I see a whole lot of situations that if I was in that situation, I'd probably react really badly. And I'm just lucky I'm not in that situation. So that makes me deeply uncomfortable.
And me too. Not about you, but about my, things that I've done. And so that's why we have the request from our teachers to do the purification practices and do them, the 4 opponent powers and things like this, not just for the things that we've done today or we've done that we remember of this lifetime, but including all our past lifetime, assuming that everything anyone's ever done that we've heard about, what 10-year-olds did, or the decisions made by politicians, and we may never have had that power, but we have at times done things that, they've had run-on consequences for others and things like that. And we need to do our best not to, the 4 opponent powers, the power of restraint, not doing them again. And when we do our purification practices, thinking about not just this lifetime. Yeah. So we've only got 15 minutes left. I think.
Mm.
So we might, and if there are questions that go over into next session, that's okay. We don't have to. It may be that you think about questions in this time before next week, and so we can see at the beginning. But to deeply understand our anger, where it comes from, not just in this life, but our potential. We also have the karmic seeds for kindness and patience and things like that. And these are the ones, the virtuous qualities that we need to, as much as possible, encourage and rejoice when we've done those. Reba Rinpoche says this, rejoicing in the virtuous things that we have done, that we remember this is the easiest way to accumulate merit. It doesn't take a whole lot of physical activity. And then we can also rejoice in the virtuous qualities of the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, the teachers we know in this lifetime. And this is a way of accumulating, he says, great waves of merit without a whole lot of physical effort. And, when we do make contributions to things like Doctors Without Borders and things like that, hope whatever we can do, hoping that, that it does bring about that care being available for these people, and that the situation arises where they all get the care they need and things like that. So in our mind, expanding that out. Yeah. So when we can, getting back to the teachings, then when we think, if the thing that makes us angry, if we can remove ourselves from the situation, or when it's safe to do so, thinking, examining with our mind, what it is that brought about our first angry thought, and then was the reaction appropriate, or did it stop the situation? And we can also ask ourselves, when we consider the objective facts, was that a rational decision that we made to become hostile, or would it have been better to stay more neutral? And how much did we infer about other people, and how much did we react to that? And, in the traffic, when you're held up in traffic, like I say, we drive a lot in Australia, it's an opportunity sometimes to think, well, this is irritating me, but there are people who are on the way to work and they're going to be late and their boss is going to be cranky with them. There's all sorts of different people here. Sometimes there's hold-ups on the highway. There are people with children in the car, or people themselves who are really wanting to get to the service station and go to the toilet, but who knows when the traffic's going to let us get there. There's all sorts of difficulties. Yeah.
Daryl's also just said, I try to remind myself that I don't have to have an opinion on everything, so I don't get too tangled up in my mind.
Well, that's also some things sometimes we can just let it, okay, that's what happened. From the point of view of the reporter or whatever, if it's something on TV isn't always entirely accurate, or the news. And, are we making it better by focusing on it and getting more and more agitated with it? So in the 8 verses of thought transformation, Geshe Langri said, vigilant, the moment a delusion appears in my mind, endangering myself and others, I shall confront and avert it without delay. So to be always able to do that. So, these different situations that arise, especially if there are children, they see that anger, whatever, can sometimes get you what you actually want at the time, at the moment, and sometimes then they copy that. And Geshe Zopa, who comes here sometimes, said, the true nature of our mind has the foundation of improvement. We can improve our mind, and this is very important, all the way up to perfection. So we can be generous, like the generosity of giving to charities or people that are contributing to the happiness of others or relieving suffering. But that we can generate all that all the way up to the perfection of generosity, and then in the deeper teachings, the perfection of generosity, which is a complicated thing to get your head around, not suitable, not time to fit it in here. So one of the other things I'd like to talk briefly about, and I think our meditation might be at the beginning of next class, sometimes people see Buddhist images with a sword or weapons, and they say, does that mean it's okay for Buddhists to, use weapons to harm? So this is not what it means at all. And it can be quite hard sometimes to explain that the difference between wrath, because we have these wrathful deities, but Manjushri is a very good example. So we got a picture of Manjushri up? Okay. So when we look at Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom, in his right hand, he's got a sword with flame at the end. This is not to be pointed at another person. This sword is to cut through our own ignorance. This is to cut through all the things we do out of anger or whatever, a wish to harm, a wish to steal, whatever it might be. Cut through all those things that in the long term bring us more harm, but we think, oh, well, it's okay for now. It'll get me what I want today. So cutting through that ignorance, and then in his other hand, there's a lotus, and on top of that is the Prajnaparamita Sutra, all the Buddha's teachings on wisdom. And so that's what the sword is for, to help us be free of our ignorance and develop our wisdom. And we need to be, like I said, fierce with our own anger. This is where we should direct our anger, at our own anger, wishing to harm or remove our anger, not external things. And so sometimes then there are the wrathful protectors that look really fierce. And so not Manjushri, not the protectors, they're not motivated by anger, even though they look like they're quite angry. Wrathful actions are motivated by kindness and compassion, and it's the wish to drive away harmers. It's like the Dharma protectors, they have these fierce expressions to turn away external harmers or interferers that might harm Dharma places or Dharma practices and that sort of thing. But also they are inner protectors, protecting the Dharma in our mind, helping us not let the part of our mind that has familiarity with the Dharma, remembering the teachers we've met, the teachings they gave, vows we've taken, commitments we've made, whatever that might be. Just our wish to develop patience and compassion, all these things that are related to our Dharma practice, protecting them from harm or being dissipated. So they look quite fierce, but their motivation is to turn away externally and internally those things that prevent the Dharma being available and us practicing the Dharma. And so if we can, Ross doesn't have anger, it's a different it's not self-centered, it's motivated by the wish to benefit others and save them from situations that bring them suffering. So sometimes we need to have this wrathful approach to see, if someone's doing something that's harming them, especially if it's a child. If a child insists on, I don't know, doing things that are risky, running across the street without really looking at the traffic or whatever 2-year-olds do. And so you might tell them gently it's not safe and whatever, but sometimes if they're not going to hear that clearly, then sometimes you have to sort of really restrain them, prevent them from harming themselves and say, you can't do that. That's not safe. and be a bit forceful about it. So you're not trying to harm the child, you're trying to prevent them experiencing suffering. So we have to treat our minds a little bit like that 2-year-old that wants to go and do stupid things and be a bit forceful with ourselves sometimes. Yeah.
So we should do the meditation at the end. We've got time.
You sure?
Yeah, yeah.
So were there any other questions?
There's no hands up at the moment.
So just before we do the meditation, Geshe Sultram, he was in Sarah J when there were celebrations for His Holiness's birthday, and people gave presents, but His Holiness said that the best present he could get would be if whenever anger, jealousy, or unhealthy competitiveness arises, people would bring to mind an image of His Holiness and remember his attempts to bring peace and harmony to the world. So ideally we could bring this idea of peace and harmony into our world with whoever we see as patient. Maybe we had a really patient grandmother, maybe whoever it might have been, where we admired their patience, their ability to manage situations without falling into anger. And they would be people who, when anger started to arise, when they were just a little bit irritated or agitated, before it became aggravated or aggressive, when it was just that mild irritation, we're aware of that and intervene, oh, why am I being irritated about this? It's not something irritation's going to help. Just because, the line in the shopping centre is long or whatever, me being irritated and impatient, that's not helping. That just makes us uncomfortable while we wait. Whereas if we, think about the other people there who maybe have more pressing needs than us to get through the checkout, pick up kids from school, get to work, whatever it might be, that can sometimes help us diminish. While it's still a very early on, like slightly displeasing, slightly aggravating, before it becomes, where we get to the checkout and, as I've seen some people do, have a mouthful for the checkout girl about blah, blah, there should be more people here or what, because they're by then really upset. Yeah. And sometimes, we need to see a situation. When we see a situation, we need to speak out about it, but we can do that with the wrath rather than with the anger. Say the same thing, but phrase it in a way where we're saying, can't you see this is making the situation worse? Or however it is we want to say it, that isn't, you're a bad person, that's the end of that. There's no discussion, because when we look, that's not how it is.
Actually, Losang, to cut through everything, I often just think, what would His Holiness do? and my mind will say a completely different thing than what I would say. And so it's like this filter that I run through.
Well, that's exactly what His Holiness was saying, bring to mind someone, His Holiness is the perfect example. When you think of all the things that's happened in his life, born in a little part of Tibet, recognized as this amazing, amazing person, the whole overtaking of Tibet, the harm, the killing, all that happened, no retaliation, just the wish that all beings, everyone involved, be free of suffering. So this is exactly what he was talking about, Miffy. You probably weren't there, but yeah. So this meditation we're going to do, it's a good meditation to do it towards the end of the day. You sure we've got time?
Well, it's just on the time, but
other people might have to run off. Okay, we'll do a relatively short version. So remembering what I said about starting with a very mild difficulty. And so we've got habitual responses, thought patterns that are embedded in our mind. Why? Because they've worked for us in the past. At some time, they've worked. But it's now come to a time when we realise they don't really work. When we were bigger than our siblings, we could just take their stuff. Now they're bigger than us. Don't try and take their stuff, whatever it was. So we can sometimes just fall into all sorts of habitual things. But this is a way of challenging those. So just settling your mind. And this is called transforming negative experiences into positive. And generate a strong motivation that we're doing this to train our mind to experience difficult situations with a calm, clear, gentle approach. So just thinking about a situation that we've had recently, a difficult situation in which you might have become impatient, lost your temper, seen others as problems or enemies trying to harm you. And you might have become impatient. Maybe due to that, maybe you said or did something. Just remembering that the situation's over, all those, don't get the emotions. We're just looking objectively. Stand apart from the situation and you're just looking at the memories. And so just having that situation in mind, remembering what's happening from beginning to end, and observe what happened in your mind and in your physical behaviour and what you said. So letting go of the feelings, disidentify with those feelings as much as possible. And just watching dispassionately. And then think about the disadvantages and the harmful nature of the negative responses that took place. How did you feel while you were impatient and angry? Did you feel happy? Were you at peace? Were you comfortable within your body and in your mind? And when that angry feeling led to angry words and actions, what effect did that have on you? And on the others around you? Did it make them happy? Did it make the situation easier? Did the angry behaviour help with the situation, bringing it to a positive solution? Did it help everyone involved, yourself and the others, feel good and understand each other better? So now think about how you might have handled the situation differently with a calm, balanced, open attitude, free of anger or impatience or resentment. Think about how your experience and others' experience might have been completely different. generate a strong feeling of how extraordinary it would be to be able to manage difficult situations just like this one with a calm, peaceful mind, free of agitation or anger. And now replay that entire situation in your mind from beginning to end, imagining it completely differently. Imagine yourself reacting perfectly with warmth and openness towards the others, calm, balanced understanding. Imagine how the situation might have played itself out in this totally different way. And then consider, is the outcome different? How do you feel about yourself at the end of the interchange? Pleased or disappointed? What kind of experience do the others have in your replay? More positive or negative? So make a strong determination, and next time you encounter difficulties that try your patience, you'll take a breath, take a step back, try to respond with openness and patience, keeping your mind under control and out of the control of anger. Remember, it's very easy to dismiss what's said when someone's angry, to think they're just having a bad day. They don't really mean that. In addition, make a strong determination that each time you find yourself responding with impatience, agitation, and anger in the future, you'll practice this meditation to gradually overcome those negative response patterns and to train the mind to respond with kindness, balance, and patience. And finally, dedicate all your positive energy and insights from the class to this meditation, to the well-being and happiness of yourself and to all the living beings that you meet in this lifetime and all those you don't meet in this lifetime. So thank you all. I'm sorry it went a bit late. It seems a bit like a teacher who kept the class in. Sorry.
Well, I think we're feeling sufficiently patient and tolerant enough that you've primed us that we'll forgive you. In fact, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you, everyone.
And if there are other questions, we can have questions at the beginning of the class next week.